welcome everyone to tonight's Citizens Climate University. It's a weekly webinar program of Citizens Climate Lobbies that provides CCL supporters like you and I with access to in-depth training opportunities on topics relating to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'm your host, Brett Cease, and tonight's essential topic is self-care for stress reduction. The overwhelming unknown of a global pandemic impacting our own families, our futures, and for many of us, our well-being is a perfect storm for chaos both inside and out. And I can imagine a lot of us on the line are experiencing some form of that. Add to this the underlying stress of climate change and just the simple everyday life management that we face, and our well-being as climate advocates can sometimes teeter on edge. So how do we move forward with business as usual, and how do we help stay the course to avoid our business as usual future? We'll explore tonight and help you in attending to your own inner advocate and to help one who so clearly wants to change, ease, and find calm, find and create that. To do that, we're going to have four wonderful speakers. We're going to start the call with Tamara, and then we'll have Debbie, Jeff, and Laura join us after that. Tamara Staten co-founded her local CCL chapter in Portland back in 2012. She continues as lead facilitator today. In 2014, she started as regional coordinator for the Greater Pacific Northwest and now supports leaders in expansion efforts throughout all of those states, including Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Alaska, Hawaii, and the Pacific Island territories. And just this month, actually, she's accepted a new position to work with me in the Education and Engagement Department. So we are very excited at the opportunity to integrate her background in the education with the climate work that she's already done so well with. Debbie is also a veteran with CCL. She joined almost exactly 3 years ago. Her elevator pitch for CCL is the mission statement: we empower individual breakthroughs in personal and political power. And since getting involved in the Washington, D.C. chapter, she's made chapter and membership development her primary mission and has spent a lot of time thinking about how to implement that with her colleagues. We'll also have the wonderful Jeff Joslin, a group leader of CCL's North Atlanta chapter. Jeff knows these stressors all too well. As an airline captain with a degree in psychology, Joslin also knows that a spiritual or contemplative practice can help us develop a more satisfying self-care, self-empathy, and stronger relationships. As Jeff says, the challenge with meditation and introspection is that it can be hard to do alone, and that's why we're going to learn more tonight about the work that he and Laura, along with many others, have done to find success and learn to practice that in a supportive community. And last but certainly not least, we have the wonderful Laura Sachs, who heads up the Nelson West Kootenay chapter of CCL Canada and is a climate reality leader as well. And both Jeff and Laura are the co-leads for the Peer Support Action Team. So with that, our three learning goals tonight are very straightforward. We really hope that attendees after tonight can review and walk away with recommendations to help improve your care in ways that reduce and manage your stress. We hope that you can discover some new approaches, especially one that our CCL chapter in DC took to address the grief some of their volunteers feel related to the impacts of climate change. And we also look forward to exploring the option to engage with CCL's Peer Support Action Team community for your additional small group and community support. So with that, we just want to thank all of you so much for joining us tonight. It's an honor to have you. And with that, let's jump right into the first part of our training.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett. Super happy to be here and even happier that the rest of you are here. I tend to pack it in, and I did the same tonight, and I'm going to sort of try to find the balance between presence and fullness. I came up with 4 steps to self-care for stress reduction, being a linear thinker myself, and I thought it might be easiest if I laid it out for you that way. So number 1, consider the context, and we're going to go into all these in more detail. Number 2, know yourself and accept your needs, which is way easier said than done. Lean on your resources and play, which is also sometimes easier said than done. So in regards to considering the context, we live in these societies that put pressure on us. We have situations that sometimes are more grave than other situations, and we have surrounding cultures that we need to consider. And then we also have this organization that we're all a part of together, CCL. And some of you, if you're a more seasoned volunteer, you may know about the CCL way. And the CCL way is based on many of our values, and many of us often say that action is the antidote to despair. And there's this way in CCL about getting things done and moving forward and being focused. And and that works a lot of the time for a lot of us. But there are times when it doesn't work. So, for example, I find that it can be really challenging to sort of balance even just a couple of the values in CCL. Let's take optimism and integrity. So, for me, being somebody who tends to feel my emotions and be very in tune and aware of them, how do I feel grief and notice the grief that I'm feeling while still being optimistic? And so, how can we balance conflicting values when action isn't enough to be the antidote to despair? And so, that's where the rest of this comes in. So, knowing yourself and accepting your needs. Um, I like to ask what is needed in any particular moment. So, this takes a while, but definitely comes with practice. So, what do you need? What do you want? And how can you really be okay with that reality? So, for example, I don't know how many of you on the line are parents, but I know that at the end of the day, as much as I may want to do uh, a meditation with my child that she's asking me if I'll do with her or snuggle with her, sometimes I'm just done. And as guilty as I might feel, I've also learned to just be okay with that. That it's okay for me to need my time at the end of the day. It's okay for me to feel like I can't do any more climate. I just need to binge watch Netflix right now. So it's really being able to find that balance. So we have a quick poll. I have a quick poll for you that I invite you to participate in if you are interested. So my question is, do you have any needs or emotions that you struggle to fully allow yourself to have or feel? If you are aware of any of those, just go ahead and add them to the chat if you're willing. I'm not going to call on you, I promise. I just thought it'd be interesting for us to be able to see, what are some of the feelings and needs that we feel that sometimes are really hard for us to accept that we feel. Like we often think, well, what does that mean about me? What does that mean about us? If I have that, what does it mean about me? We make these big stories up, and so fear, and I'm seeing hopelessness, the need to slow down, um, despair, frustration, self compassion. Great, thanks, you guys. This is awesome to have this. Taking care of yourself, yeah, putting your own mask on. That like in our society, there's this whole selfishness thing. Now you don't want to make it about me, right? Anger, yeah, definitely. That's definitely a tough one as well. So the next question is, how can we really make it okay for ourselves to need what we need, to feel the fear, to accept the sadness, to accept the hopelessness, to accept that sometimes we're angry, or to eat meat, right? Whatever it is. And so I think it comes down to, for me, asking myself, what is keeping me from allowing myself to need or want this? For example, I go back to the mom example, right? Like when I don't, when I'm really done at the end of the day and I just don't have it in me to snuggle with her that night, am I making it mean something about me? Does this mean that I'm a bad mom, for example? Which is for me like, I'm sure for many of us who are parents, right? Or for those of us who are like, how can I not take this action on climate? What does that mean about me? Does that mean that the world is going to fall apart? Does that mean we're all going to hell? Or I don't know if I'm allowed to say that here. You can mute me out, Brett. Making more work for him later. So, being able to recognize what it is that is getting in our way, right? Um, and so, you know, I I challenge you. Here's a challenge is, if you can acknowledge the bigger thing that you're making that mean about you, and then just put it on the shelf, like let it be there. Just say, I'm going to move this out of the space and I'm going to come back to it later. And then challenge yourself, like, what if you're wrong? What if I'm actually wrong about thinking that I'm a bad mom? What if I'm actually a good mom and I just don't feel like snuggling with her tonight? What if I'm actually a really amazing climate advocate, but I'm just tired right now? um, so Jeff and Laura are going to be talking about this, about needs and feelings later. So I'm excited you get to hear more about that as well. So now we're going to talk about leaning on your resources. So there are 5 resources that I'm going to talk about. The first one is knowledge of neurobiology, knowledge in general, but I think most of us lean very heavily on knowledge. And so I really wanted to specify the neurobiology part. So this is the part of my presentation where one of the parts where you get to play along. So if you'd like to, go ahead and hold up your hand like this and go ahead and make a fist. But instead of just making a regular fist, put your thumb on the inside, okay? And so what I'm going to demonstrate right now is the concept of flipping your lid. So everybody just flip your fingers up away from your thumb, okay? So that's flipping your lid. And what we've just created is a brain. Imagine this is your brain. It's your brain on and off drugs, if you remember the old ads, okay? The inside, your inner brain, this is your lizard brain. It's the fear, the emotion driver. It's the part that looks out for all of the fears. And if you imagine when you flip your lid, it can actually see better, right? So your lid is your prefrontal cortex, this front part of these fingers. It's your mammal brain. It's the part that does all of your thinking, slower thinking. Your inner brain doesn't think, it just acts. And so what happens when we get overwhelmed or angry or frustrated or whatever it is, we flip our lid, and it takes about 20 minutes for those neural pathways to be able to connect again. And so being able to understand how our brains work in conjunction with our body can actually allow us to care for ourselves, take the space, take the time, and make sure that you're giving yourself 20 minutes without maybe reading news that's going to flip your lid again or whatever it is, right? Putting on headphones so you don't have to hear your child screaming. Not talking from experience or anything at all, nothing like that. So the next resource that I'm going to point you to is community. Who is in your circles? Family, friends, colleagues, neighbors, CCLers, and yeah, maybe they're not in your immediate circles right now. Maybe you can't actually hold hands with them like in this picture. But being able to really remember that we have community can do so much for us. Again, if you would like to participate, go ahead and share in the chat. What community resources do you have? And that could be things like not just people, but things in your community that support you, places where you might go. So the next resource that I'm going to point you to is nature. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's definitely one of my favorites. So go outside. If you take nothing else from this slide, go outside, even if it's not to the forest or to the beach or to the hiking trail, though that's wonderful if you can do that. I know a lot harder for most of us right now. But, find the trees, go to a creek, go to the ocean, be in a canyon, a hillside, a hidden corner, a dirt hill, go on a walk, a hike, a bike ride, be in your garden, hang in your backyard, run your fingers through the mud, light a fire. The other thing I wanted to mention is forest bathing. I wish I could see more of you, but I'm curious if anybody's heard of forest bathing. Forest bathing is a concept that they started in Japan, and here's the concept. You go to the forest, and you have no phone, you have no camera, you have no music. You just go and you be. Not that you have to go and sit and meditate, but you just go and you soak in all of the everythingness, and you listen and you smell and you touch and you just be there. And there are so many scientific benefits of it all. I thought I would just share this super quick. It's an excerpt that I made of this video. So you can watch this for a minute.
Hi. So I brought you to the forest with me. This is one of my favorite places in the forest near my house. And I know that I was needing to get out to the forest, and I thought you might enjoy coming with me. The trillium are out in full bloom today. There's even one behind me that I'm excited to show you. Look for all of the things in the picture that are green. And go ahead and just count them. And now go ahead and count all of the things that you see that are brown.
I'm going to take us to the next resource, which is now, right now. What's happening right now? What do you see, hear, taste, touch, smell? Really like coming back to the moment of right now. My husband will often ask me, like, when I'm really stressed out, what do you need right now? And it's so helpful, right? So you really check, like, all these thoughts, do I really need all of the things that I think I need? Do I really need them right now? And the next resource is your body. Um, so many of us think that our head drives our body, or the, and it's sort of strange because we treat them like two separate things in some ways. I mean, yeah, our head is part of our body, but I think most of us think that our thoughts are in charge. Um, and most of us don't tend to look to our body nearly enough to support our well-being. And a friend of mine taught me this really powerful thing. She said, you can go through the mind to address all of the things that are challenging you, or you can go through the body. And the body is way easier and way faster. In fact, we have this point right here, like in our mid to upper back. It's where anxiety enters and exits our body. So, speaking of the body, I am going to take you through one practice. You're going to stand with your feet hip distance apart, and then you're going to take 2 long, deep breaths. Okay. And as you're taking these breaths, you're just going to imagine that you are a tree. If you'd like to close your eyes, you can do that. If you'd like to just soften your gaze in front of you, that's okay too, whichever works, right? So just imagine that you are a tree. You've got roots like running down through the earth now, through your feet. And imagine and remember that gravity holds trees and people to the earth. And if it's helpful, I find it helpful to imagine that you are a tree in Australia. And so you're hanging upside down on the earth by your feet, and gravity totally has you. And so what I'm noticing about myself is I'm just starting to sway a little bit. But the cool thing is, like, you are totally supported right now. Like, nothing is going to knock you down. You don't have to hold yourself up at all because your roots have you and gravity has you too. So just go ahead and take one more breath. And then come back to the space and sit down whenever you're ready. Thanks for playing along with me if you are able to do that. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, and I end on this because it's potentially the most important or valuable skill you can do, though it's hard for me to say that the body isn't more important, but play. I could talk about this for hours, for days. In fact, at climate camp, I talked about this for a very long time. So it's tough to do this in 3 minutes, but basically play is a state of mind. I can't say enough about the concept of play. It's highly misunderstood. Stuart Brown writes an amazing book about it. If that's the one thing you go take away, go read this book, watch his TED Talk. And essentially, we play. When you're playing optimally, if you're really playing, you are enjoying what you're doing, whatever it is, right? We all have different things that we love to do. It's not always easy to start playing. This is a really full slide, and I'm gonna basically, there's a ton of evidence that shows that with play, the brain works better. Okay, we feel more optimistic and more creative, and it's really, really good for us. It's not, so this is the enjoy concept, right? So when we're playing, we're enjoying it. And when I was thinking about this, I realized that this word is beautiful. You are being in joy. Like, that's what play is really being in joy. So it's not always easy to play, though. It's not always easy to start playing. So even though it has massive benefits, it reduces stress. It helps you tune into resources. It's not always easy to start to play because you think that you have to be in the mood. Like, oh, I don't feel like playing, right? Or my daughter will sometimes ask me to play, and my playing is not necessarily what her playing is, right? So you have to figure out, like, what do I love to do? And what does she love to do? And how can finding that balance, right, between knowing what you need, knowing what they need. Sometimes it's play for them and sometimes it's play for you. So benefits come from the doing and the brain state of being in play. So sometimes if I don't feel like playing, I'll go play anyway because play is a catalyst. And just a little bit of play opens up so much, right? Like I'll often force myself to go on a walk or force myself to put some music on and dance around in my space because I know what it's going to do for me. The other thing is sometimes we just feel guilty, like we have too much to do, or society doesn't value play, or we have pressure from family and work, or play is for kids, right? Or I don't really like to play. I think some people think, well, I don't really like to play, but everybody loves to enjoy something, right? So it's just a matter of like figuring out and having a different understanding of play. Like it's safe to say that if you find play to be a source of stress, you're not doing it right. So it's really about figuring out like what is your version of play, which brings us to your play personality. There's so much more we could say to this, but I just wanted to just introduce you to the concept of play personalities because I think it's pretty fascinating and I think it's a great way to get to know ourselves. So there's 8 of them. There's the Joker. I don't have time to go into all these, but Stuart Brown does, so you can go check it out on the internet. The kinesthete, that's somebody who is in their body, kinesthete. The explorer, the collector, the director, the artist creator, the competitor, and the storyteller. So it's not that one of us has one play personality, right? Or even that it's so structured that that oh, that's wrong. That's not your play personality, right? It's just a way to inform ourselves. So for example, I know that when I go running in a brand new neighborhood that I've never been in, like with my phone somewhere else, like I love it. I love to figure out which way should I go. I'm going to try left. That's going to be really fun. And when I do that, my brain lights up and I get all these amazing ideas. That's where I do my best planning is when I'm on a run in a new place, for example. My daughter's a total collector. She's got rocks and all sorts of things, right? So you just sort of figure out like, what do you love to do? So one man's trash is another man's treasure, or one woman's trash is another woman's treasure, right? The same goes for play. So often I will invite my husband to play a game with me. He often rejects me. I love board games and working stuff out together and working out together. He loves research and poker. Not my favorites at all, but that's what he loves, right? And that's his version of play. So when I understood our different play personalities better, it really allowed me to lean in more to mine and to give him more space for his. You get the opportunity to come together with a partner. You're going to begin to reconstruct your play history with your partner. And let me tell you what that means. So in Stuart Brown's book called Play, he talks about reconstructing your play history and the concept that play is a catalyst. So there's this woman in his book named Laura, and she's, I don't know, in her mid 40s or something. She's had a wonderful life. She's got a couple kids. She's married. She has a career that's going really well. And then she just starts to sort of notice that things just don't feel right. Like, I don't know, I'm just not quite as happy and I'm just sort of feeling stale. And she realized that everything that she was doing had a purpose to it. Everything that she was doing was working on towards something. And so she began to think about, what did I used to do? What did I do in my childhood? And what did I love to do? And she realized that she used to ride horses just to ride, and she loved it. And of course, over time, that became, she got medals, and that again became this, right? Like this insane sense of focus. So she just started doing riding once a week. She leased a horse. She would just ride. And just from that one experience once a week, everything else started falling into place in her life. So that's what I'm going to invite you to do with your partner, is just to begin to reconstruct your play history with your partner. Reflect on something that you used to love to do as a child. It might be something that you no longer do, or perhaps you've carried it with you over the years. Share this with your partner and consider if and how you might be able to integrate this love in small or large ways as a catalyst to play. I hope that felt helpful for you. As I said, we've just barely skimmed the surface on play and all of this stuff, really, but The last thing that I wanted to wrap up with is I just wanted to share with you briefly about Climate Camp, because a lot of my passion doesn't necessarily stem from Climate Camp, but a lot of what has got me really revved up in this space in CCL is a 2-day workshop that I co-led with some of the people on this call, with about 35 leaders in CCL. And it was a workshop retreat focusing on joy, resilience, and effective climate leadership. And so we explored the science of play and resilience, and we spent time building with hands-on practice on building both of those things. And we got to discuss the art and facilitation of communication. It took place in the Columbia River Gorge. It was an opportunity to explore and address our internal experience as climate advocates, which is something that we don't often get to do at national conferences or even regional conferences. And we got to discuss the concept of othering and how to be more inclusive at the source, and figure out how to, in practice, how to integrate more joy and resilience in a way that makes us more effective advocates, right? So doing this self-care and being able to become a master of our own emotional experience is going to make us stronger advocates, because what we're dealing with is really heavy stuff. I mean, you take climate change in itself, that's heavy enough, and you add anything to that, right? Like, let's say a world pandemic, that's a lot. Climate Camp was a great success, and I have lots of ideas and thoughts and dreams about where it might go next. Hopefully, it will be coming to a region near you one of these days. But here's a list of resources I have when I'm not doing CCL. I run a business called Changing Your Climate, and there are a number of resources there. There's a blog, like I mentioned. There's a Climate Camp page. There are videos and poems and practice ideas. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate your attention and your interest.
And thank you so much, Tamara, for really helping center us and really suggesting these really helpful self-care focused approaches. We really look forward to sharing how they were at, and I encourage people, as you try them out in your own life, to really share with the larger CCL community too what's been working or effective for you in your own world. But with that, we can have a chance to jump into our next speaker tonight and learn a little bit from all the work that you and the DC chapter did in hosting your climate anxiety event.
Thanks, Brett, and thanks everybody. Glad to be here. So last year, the DC chapter organized an event where volunteers and members of the community could come and discuss their anxieties around climate change. The origin of this event started after a few leaders in our chapter got together for a planning dinner. It was just after the 2018 COP conference in Poland. And the conversation somehow turned to our despair over the climate. CCL is very big on optimism and solutions and actions, so we usually avoid the doom and gloom. And maybe there was a lot of pressure being built up that hadn't been expressed. So that evening, I think that folks got to unload some of their worries and their anxieties that they've been carrying. I felt like we should create a space to allow other CCL activists and members of the public to also get an opportunity to unload and share this burden. And a few weeks later, at our Mid-Atlantic Regional Conference, we did have a breakout on climate and public health. And the panel included a CCL volunteer and climate psychologist, Dr. Judy Kramer. It felt like 80% of the questions during the Q&A were directed to her about mental health and climate. So even the optimistic CCLers have a hunger to get their anxieties heard. I do want to add a caution. In the original dinner, we were dangerously close to ending on a very low point. When I planned the discussion event, my number one priority was to make sure that people didn't leave worse off than they came. I was really intentional on making sure that at least half the event was focused on the positive. And on that note, I ended my event with a quote that has become my touchstone. David Roberts, he's a climate writer for the news website Vox. It was an article titled Hope and Fellowship. And he says, what are people really asking when they ask about hope? If the deep down question that they're asking is, I feel hopeless, like my efforts don't matter. And then the response is, when we ask for hope, then I think we're just asking for fellowship. The weight of climate change, like any weight, it's easier to bear with others. And if there's anything I've learned in these last 10 years, it's that there are many, many others. They are out there, men, women, children, people of extraordinary imagination, of courage, and perseverance. They're pouring themselves into this fight for a better future. You are not alone. And as long as you are not alone, there is always hope.
Well, that is perfect transition to setting us up to really explore another wonderful resource to generate hope and to not feel alone. And the floor is yours.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Brett. We're really glad to be here tonight. It's good timing for this. I want to tell you a little bit about what brought me to peer support, and then Laura will as well, and we'll go from there. About 7 or 8 years ago, when I first started really delving into climate change, I got really depressed. And through a series of events, I found Joanna Macy's Active Hope. And the active part of having hope brought me to CCL. And in CCL, I found peer support. And through that time, I was also participating in some workshops called ONGO that a couple I have known a long time did. That was their life work, part of their life work. And every time I took it, I thought this would just be wonderful to bring to CCL. But it was always a challenge to envision how that would happen. And finally, at one point, they wrote a book. And the book, the ONGO book, makes a really simple way for ONGO to be available to others. And so with Laura, we've been doing ONGO groups here for peer support and members of CCL. Laura?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I participated in the first ONGO session that Jeff helped organize a few years ago. And it really helped me. I was, like many of you, dealing with on again, off again, climate anxiety, even in being involved with CCL. And also it helped me with having difficult conversations in my climate advocacy work and also in personal growth. So then I offered to help Jeff co-lead the peer support action team, and wanted to also mention Katarina Lindman is also helping with that as well. And the cornerstone of the peer support team's work is this 12-week ONGO program that we're going to be talking about. But we also offer occasional webinars and other self-care approaches. And we always welcome new ideas. And I've got lots of great ideas after hearing both Tamara and Debbie talking. So any ideas for webinars are welcome. We also use our CCL community peer support action team forum for sharing and discussing ideas. And so really welcome all of you to join and let that forum be a little more active, because in ONGO, we often start our practices with the meditation. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thanks, Laura. So we were going to talk about how people feel around climate. And I think we've kind of established that there's a lot of anxiety and frustration. And right now, we even have, this COVID, global pandemic that's kind of really heaped it on. And so there's a lot of emotion that's evident in climate activists and all of us right now. And I was going to actually kind of ask you guys what you use to cope with the climate anxiety that you've been feeling, or the anxiety that you're experiencing right now. But I think we covered that really well with Tamara. So I'm going to just move forward to the next slide, Brett.
And Jeff, I'm just going to interrupt 1 second also, because on this bit about coping, there's also sometimes negative things that we do to cope. And I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge, and then it's in ONGO, we do, talk, it's not just all good, sometimes we might be over consuming media, for example, or alcohol or something else. And so finding ways to cope that are positive is what we're after here.
Thanks. Good point, Laura. So one of the things that I guess is important to us in the work we're doing in peer support is thinking about who you want to be as a climate activist. What are the values that you bring to your climate work? What's the consciousness that I want to bring to the world, and am I using that in my climate work? We have a choice on how we respond to what's happening in the world, and that consciousness of choice is what one of the big things that OnGo is about. One of the things that I have just was overjoyed about was when CCL adopted these core values. I mean, I could always see them, but to actually have them, in print and like this was fantastic, because a lot of them were already my values. And the beauty of OnGo is that OnGo is also incorporates many of these values.
So this quote by Viktor Frankl really resonates, how we take those core values and make them real in our life. So between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so what we are wanting to talk about today is that space between stimulus and response.
So OnGo is really about filling that space. And what we try to fill it with is authenticity and values and actions that fit you and make you feel good about what you're doing. In OnGo, we find we talk about meaningful and doable ways to connect more deeply. First of all, with ourselves, and then also with others. It's kind of like a dual connection that we're constantly working on through the program. With OnGo, we also talk a lot about fundamental needs, and the needs wheel that Brett put into the chats box is one of the tools that we use quite a bit of, because the way we look at it is when you understand the fundamental needs that are being expressed, either yourself or when you're listening to someone else really deeply, the more we're able to connect to those needs, the better understanding, the better empathy we have, and the more likely we are to choose a strategy that either helps us get those needs met, or just merely understanding the needs a lot of times gives us some relief, even if we're not able to get the needs met. So this is the needs wheel that we use, and we're going to use it for an exercise coming up. It's I guess you could call it a short list of fundamental universal needs, and you'll identify a lot of these needs in your everyday life. And we're going to put I guess Britt just put the 9 of them that are on the outside of the wheel. But if, for instance, you are interested in, you're trying to talk about meaning, or meaning's important to you, you can go deeper on other needs that involve meaning by looking inside of the wheel from that point. We're going to do a demo next, and what we're going to do first is Laura and I are going to demonstrate what we'd like you to do, and then we're going to break into groups of 2 again and let you give it a try. So a lot of our conversations, I guess, at least my conversations, so maybe not all of yours, but a lot of times it's sharing of information, or I'll be saying something happened to me, and the response I get a lot of times is somebody listens and they say, "Oh, that happened to me," and then the next thing you know, I'm listening to their story about what happened to them. There's not I sometimes will say something that is meaningful to me, and I don't get a sense that the other person really heard it, or that they were maybe even fully present to it. So this demonstration is about having a really deep and connecting listening experience with somebody else. What I'm going to ask Laura to do is she's going to share something that is meaningful to her right now. She's going to say something that's really fairly short. I don't need a lot of information, but then after she does that, I'm going to just take a guess and see if, while I'm listening, I pick up a couple of the needs that are present for her and what she's saying.
So Jeff, I'm really worried about my daughter. She's living in New York City right now, and she's alone in her apartment for the last couple of weeks. And I'm just concerned about her, and also don't know when she's going to be able to get back home.
Mm. So, Laura, I'm wondering if physical safety, peace of mind, and connection might be needs you're experiencing.
Yeah, those all resonate. Definitely that connection and safety. I think also maybe my need for nurturance to take care of her, and I can't, and order, trying to understand what's going on, are important. Yeah.
Mm. So nurturance is what I'm hearing, and also physical safety and connection. Is that right?
Yeah. In fact, last night I talked with her on the phone, and I realized how important that connection is, because I just felt so much better just talking to her.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate that, Laura. And I know it's a challenge for you right now. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about listening, and then give you a chance to try it. So the listening that we're talking about is very focused and very intentional. It's really easy for me when I'm listening to start wanting to fix something, like, oh, have you thought about doing this? Or, maybe wanting to change the way she feels, or judging it in some way, like, what's she doing there? And my goal when I'm listening is to it's almost like meditation, just kind of gently push any thoughts that start to intrude like that out, and go back to simply wanting to understand and be empathetic and listen for the needs that are being expressed. The one other thing I want to say is that needs, when I tell Laura the needs that I'm hearing, I'm not analyzing her, so I'm not saying this with certainty. I'm saying it with inquisitiveness. I want to know if that's what she is experiencing. And as you can see, she did agree, but she also added something else, which kind of helped fine tune it both for her and for me. We kind of call it the dance in OnGo, where there's kind of this back and forth of suggesting needs, and then finding out whether they're accurate or not, maybe getting a few more. And then that goes on until there's a place where it seems like there's a natural ending to it.
So in your breakout room, here's what you're going to be doing. First, introduce yourself to your partner briefly, if it's a different partner, and decide who's going to be the sharer and who's going to be the listener. So one person shares a very short story, and then the other person focuses on listening intently. And then the listener looks at the needs wheel and guesses several needs that are reflected in their story. And then the sharer provides feedback about whether or not those needs resonate. And then lastly, the listener then confirms what they've heard. And so remember that we're not about giving advice, and so that's not what you're going to be doing here. And it's very short, it's only going to be 3 minutes. So just be mindful of the time. And so I hope that's clear. There's one sharer, one listener, and you use the needs wheel to guess the needs.
What we'd like to do is harvest this a little bit. I'm just curious, how did it feel to be listened to like that? There's a sense of clarity that comes after a conversation like this. So sometimes I'll be in kind of a muddle, and after I've talked for a while and somebody's helped me see what the needs were, there's a solution that seems to pop up, or maybe just a sense of peace that maybe there isn't a solution, but I have a clearer handle of what underlying need has been sitting there for me when I wasn't aware of it. The other thing I wanted to mention was this work has really helped me a lot when I go up to Washington, D.C., or I'm talking with a legislator. I actually, in some of the lobby groups, I've created a position that's not on our official CCL list called listener. And what I try to do as the listener is listen to the underlying needs. And if we're not talking about those needs, I try to see if I'm correct on what they are. And those needs are actually the place where we can connect, because the fundamental needs that the staff person or legislator is trying to address are also fundamental needs I have. So then it's a matter of, okay, how can we connect around those needs? So that has really been helpful with my CCL work. We just want to briefly talk about some of the things that we cover in OnGo. We've been talking about empathy. We talk a lot about core beliefs. Gratitude is a big part of what we do. I think so that we experience and try to find ways to experience gratitude more. And then the one that I really wanted to mention is getting hooked. The getting hooked is, I think a lot of us experience that, where somebody will say something and the next thing you know, it's like pushes your anger button, or you immediately start talking about something. It's almost like it flips a switch on you. And with OnGo, what I've found is that I'm getting hooked less often. I kind of find that space between the stimulus and what I used to do as a response as a way to connect with myself and come up with a response that's more helpful to the underlying needs that are being expressed. Or if I can't do that, find a way to give myself some time, like Tamara mentioned, the 20 minutes. So find a way to get away and find the time to reconnect with those things and then come back.
So a little bit about OnGo really briefly. We've offered 6 OnGo sessions so far, and was thrilled to hear that Tamara also offered an OnGo session last year. The next one starts on April 13th on Zoom, and we're putting the sign-up link in the chat box if you're interested. It's intensive. It's a 12-week session, but to me, it more than pays off with what you get from it. So you can also find more information on the peer support page in Community. And so there's a link here as well. It's going to be put into the chat box. And Jeff and my emails are here. So if you want to be in touch, we're always happy to answer any questions. So thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.